All right, we got the being recorded message, so I think we're good.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready, Mr. Polanski?
I am ready.
Okay, so want to say thank you to everyone for joining us tonight for this PTA Council Primary School Reopen Forum. We know it's been a rough week, actually probably a rough 6 months. But in particular, the storm this week did a number on power and internet connectivity. And with that in mind, Mr. Polanski's agreed to do another of these for primary schools on Monday at the same Zoom link at 7 p.m. So if you know people that weren't able to make it tonight, if you could share that info, that would be great, because we know there's still people struggling with internet and power. I wanted to introduce myself because I haven't had the chance to meet a lot of the younger district parents now that my own kids are long out of the primaries. My name is Kristen Kanzer. I'm the PTA Council President. You will all be hearing shortly from your school unit presidents with beginning of the year Zoom meetings. So please be on the lookout for those, and for membership info. We really need all of you more than ever to join. We need to do a lot to support our kids and staff in this, what's turning into a difficult beginning of the year. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how tonight will work. We're asking Mr. Polanski to give us a little synopsis of the primary plan, and then he's offered to take some questions. In order to keep things manageable, I think we're going to ask you initially to type your questions into the chat. If you all don't know where the chat is, if you go to the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, and if you're on a phone, tap on participants. At the bottom of that, you should see a chat function. And if you type your message, we'll see it. We'll try and answer as many questions as we can before 8 o'clock. Okay, so I really want to thank Mr. Polanski for offering to do these forums for us. And I also want to thank him and all of the amazing administrators who worked really hard to put this plan together. It's truly been nonstop for them since March. And just really quickly, National PTA advocated for districts to be able to work with medical professionals to make the plan that works best for their district in that particular moment of time, and factor in all of the factors and the numbers of the pandemic and everything else. So I know Mr. Polanski and his team did that, and they came up with this plan very carefully and thoughtfully. So anyway, with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Polanski, and say thank you, and I will, I'll check the chat for you.
Okay, and I don't want anybody shut out of asking questions, so if we have to go to voice, I'll switch over.
Great.
I don't want to spend too much time. You had most of you on tonight had a chance to read the plan. If you haven't done so, please take some time this weekend to take a look. You're welcome to join us again on Monday to ask any questions that you may not have had this evening. A couple of things I just want to throw out before we get started. I know I have some principals and directors on with us tonight. There may be some questions that I don't answer. I see Mr. Ashwin. How are you? There may be some questions I don't answer because they are more appropriately answered by a building level administrator. So if it is something specific to Southdown, either administratively or on the instructional platform, I may hold that question off, push that question toward that direction. And I know the principals are going to do their own orientations in this regard specific to their building. So I'd like to kind of do this on a district-wide perspective. I know there are some staff members that are joining us this evening as well. I have 4 separate meetings set up for them. So just to give the parents and others on tonight a chance to ask the questions, I'm going to ask the staff to hold their questions until the meeting's designated for them. And obviously, if anything comes up tonight, just jot it down and I will certainly be ready to answer them for you. Our first staff meeting is on Monday morning or Monday evening. I have it on my calendar. Whichever it is, it's there.
It's probably
Okay.
morning because you have us in the evening.
That's correct. It is morning. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay. So I see the first question. I'm going to go right to it. The first question I'm looking at here is, will each desk have a protected barrier? And I may editorialize a little bit because it'll bring other ideas to mind. So this has been an expensive venture for the district. We have spent, at this point, close to $500,000 on things that we would not have to purchase had it not been for the manner in which we need to reopen. We are opening, and I know there are lots of opinions out there, and I understand that some may agree with certain things and not with others, and vice versa. But we are opening on a very conservative basis, meaning that social distancing, masks, and physical barriers are part of our plan. So the first question, will each desk have a protected barrier? Yes, it will. They are three-sided, flexible, translucent. They almost look like cubicles that are ventilated, that the children will have in front of them at their individual desks and in the cafeterias at the secondary level where they may be eating. Okay. Okay, the next question I have here is, what will the virtual days and the virtual plan look like? I'm not sure exactly how to answer that question. It'll look a little bit different at each building, at each grade level, but the schedule is included in Appendix A of the plan. So I'll ask that you look at that specifically. If this is where I think the question is going. For the most part, what the children at home will see on the days that they are assigned to be home. One more thing I'll suggest for those that, I'm hearing some background noise. I think everybody's muted. If you're not muted, please mute your phone. The children at home will see the smart board via webcam and will have access to the sounds in the classroom as well. So they'll have for the most part, a full educational experience, as will the children in school. And there will be some arrangements made in terms of individual subject areas, individual types of lessons where the interaction may differ on a day-to-day basis. So the days may look a little different depending on what the lesson involves and at what grade level it's situated. Okay, I'm now looking at the question on kindergartners, and if there's any follow-up, feel free to toss it into the chat area. As for kindergartners, since they are in school every day, how many students will be in a class and where will the classroom be? Are there enough teachers to open more sections if necessary? So there's two questions there. Right now, we decided to bring the kindergartners back every day because we start with a small kindergarten class size to begin with. So we've generally been in the 18 to 20 area, and we're going to try and keep it even below that. If we need to, we are prepared to use a larger facility for kindergarten classrooms, like a gymnasium, where we can spread the desks out even more. It's not ideal, but it does allow us to bring our youngest students in on an everyday basis. Are there enough teachers to open more sections if necessary? The answer to that is no. What we have budgeted is what we have budgeted, and right now, registration has been slowed a little bit by the pandemic, but we should have the number of kindergarten teachers that we need to cover all buildings and all sections. Okay, how will you ensure classes are balanced when they are being split randomly by alphabet? We have the cohorts mapped out so that no classroom on any given day, and there may be some shifting of cohorts to accomplish that, particularly at the secondary level, and to keep families together. We're not going to split any siblings. Sometimes siblings may be in situations where they don't have the same surname, but under no circumstance will a class to begin the year have more students on a given day than the number of desks in the room that are socially distanced in an appropriate manner. How many students will be in a kindergarten class if they will be going in every day? Like I said, right now we are looking at using a larger facility for kindergarten classrooms if needed. So we would be able to handle between 15 and 20 on a socially distanced manner, but it looks like at this point we'll be able to accommodate, much like we can at the other grade levels, sections of no greater than 15 on a given day with the number of staff members we have available. I can't promise that because registration is not yet complete. Okay, I answered the kindergarten question already. This was what exactly is the plan for kindergarten. It only says all day in person. How can they be the only all day in-person group safely? And just to reiterate, we would be using a different, larger space for them, and our kindergarten class sizes are of a smaller nature to begin with. Okay, and that went back to kindergarten. Why is kindergarten not a hybrid model? And I'll also mention that the plan itself is designed to be flexible. And one of the questions that I'm sure is out there, and I really appreciate this community, has been very supportive of the fact that we've started with 50% for the most part at the elementary level and with 4 cohorts at the secondary level. It is important to us to be able to pressure test all of the things that we have in place. And we felt that simply to open our doors and allow everybody in at the same time, it's not the way that, that we can adequately determine that the things that we have in place are going to be functional and effective for both students and staff. Okay, will teachers be tested weekly? If not, how often? Right, I understand the governor said something the other day about schools doing testing. We are not a limited service laboratory. That is a specific designation. We will not be doing testing on site. We will not be requiring that teachers be tested. What we will be doing is, and there will be, we'll have to rely on people at home and on staff to answer the questions daily that need to be answered as they're outlined in the plan. But obviously, if they have a temperature of 100.0 degrees Fahrenheit or greater, if they have other symptoms, if they've been in contact with somebody who has symptoms and is tested positive, if they've traveled to a restricted area, these are all questions that must be answered daily by everybody who enters our building. We will also have infrared temperature scanners set up at multiple entrances in most buildings, depending on the building. But for example, the high school may have several of them. People are going to have to walk through. The temperature is recorded quickly, and if it does register positive, they will be retested with a handheld scanner. Okay, why is lunch not taking place in the classroom? I'm just going in the order that I'm receiving them. At the elementary level, lunch is taking place in the classroom. It is outlined in the plan. At the secondary level, because of the shifting between classes in that cohort, we do need to use the cafeteria. So K through 6, that's the 4 primary schools, Woodhull and Jack Abrams STEM, lunches will generally be taking place in the classroom unless there is a circumstance that does not permit that, and I can't think of one off the top of my head right now. If a child is virtual all 5 days, will they ever get a chance to see their teacher? There's no reason that arrangements can't be made to have a face-to-face in a socially distant and appropriate manner in an off-hour situation, if that's a mutually agreeable situation between the parent and the student. But the fact is, if a child is in the full virtual 5-day model, they're going to have limited face-to-face contact with the teacher. Okay, how long will my first grader be expected to listen to the live class online? I don't think he will have the patience to listen, and how well he will be able to hear what is going on. He barely had patience for the 30-minute live class last year. This is among our concerns. I do understand that, and this is not going to be perfect for all, but some of those accommodations, that's one I'm going to defer to a certain degree to the building principals, because at the lessons may be structured a little bit differently at each grade level to ensure that there is time for those, specifically those that are not in school, to pull away and do what needs to be done for a first grader, move around so they're not sitting in front of a screen all day. Unfortunately, screen time is a concern. I understand that, and we have looked into this in every way, shape, and form possible. But in order to do this and make sure that everybody is connected and online and can see what's going on in the classroom, the screen time issue is going to be one that parents may have to work on their end, or just lay expectations at home. And we can help by structuring lessons accordingly, but that is, we're going to have to understand that first graders, second graders, even 10th graders are going to have to pull away for a certain amount of time each day. Is there a virtual option for kindergartners as well? Absolutely. Please fill out the person who asked this question. If you're interested in that, you can fill out the same form that was linked to the letter sent on July, I believe it was 31st. and you can opt for that. Every classroom will have the technology to broadcast to the remote setting. Okay, this is a great question. Has Governor Cuomo officially approved the district's reopening plan, or does it still require approval before we definitely need to choose between hybrid, full distance in phase 1? This is the misunderstanding that is based on what he is saying on the big screen. He is not going to look at any of these plans. The state education department is not going to look at any of these plans unless there's a problem that comes to their attention. Not the governor, but the state education department. What the governor is going to do, I imagine by either tomorrow or Saturday, is going to declare whether or not schools can open in general or if every school is going to remain closed. He's going to make a broad statement by region, I should say. So he's going to look at each region of the state as he did when he set up the phases for reopening businesses, and he will look at Long Island as a region and say, okay, Long Island, you are good to open schools. What that means is now we can implement our plans as opposed to running a full remote program with all buildings shut down. So there is going to be no formal review of plans. What I had to do with the help of my committees and administrative team, I had to go through 80 assurances that basically are outlined in our plan. I had to prove to the state education department that we had covered these 80 items in developing our plan, and we did. And this was it was laborious, it was arduous, but we were very, very focused on making sure that not a detail was missed. And like I said, there may be things that shift, that change, but at no time will one of those assurances that I signed off on personally be changed in a manner that does not allow us to meet it. Oop, just lost my screen here. Okay. This is a very good question as well. How do the virtual students participate in specials, or do they not? So the specials will also have the remote connection in most cases. And I'm going to give you an example where it may not be possible. So right now at the elementary level, for example, rather than using a designated music room or a designated art room, which we would much prefer to do without question, but to limit the movement in the building and to keep the children from moving into not socially distanced situation, we have the specials pushing into the classroom. So the same remote option is there as it would be elsewhere. This may not apply in certain situations. For example, physical education. If the kids are outdoors, there will be different accommodations made there, and as that comes up at individual buildings, I'm going to have the principals and the teachers go through that with parents directly. So there will be some accommodations made and some activities, physical activities for the kids to perform at home when they're not in school. Is opting for full remote learning, will that mean that the student is virtual with their assigned class rather than 2 or 3 days? So yes, I think if I'm understanding that correctly, that everybody has got a seat in a classroom, whether it's hybrid or virtual. So we may reorganize based on the number of students, families that choose to go all virtual. We may shift classes so that that's balanced out, and that may allow us to go from phase 1 to phase 2 a little bit more quickly if you had a chance to look at the phases. But by the time you get your schedule and your teacher, your child will be a member of that class, whether it's in school or participating from the remote setting. I like the Google Classroom activities that he had in kindergarten last year. It was a good balance. The live classes were difficult. We just want to make sure, that's more of a statement than a question, but we just want to make sure, and I'm not attaching names to what I'm seeing here. I want to keep this generic. Hold on, I just lost my place. think I missed something here. All right, so the statement was, I like the Google Classroom activities that he had in K last year. It was a good balance. The live classes were difficult. And there may be situations where those activities are utilized once again. We also want to make sure that these children have ample face time with their teacher. And I know it's not a question on the screen right now, but I do want to mention that these kids and families have been through, we've all been through a lot over the past several months. So certainly at the beginning of the year, please go through that social and emotional well-being section. There's going to have to be time spent on reacclimating students to school in general, to helping them get past some of the quote-unquote trauma that they've experienced over the past couple of months. And we also understand that there has been some learning loss as a result, and things change very quickly in the spring. So we've been reviewing curricula from top to bottom. There will be places from K through 12 where there's going to be time spent not just on the social emotional piece, but also on the review and diagnostic piece, just to gain a sense of where children are when we start the year. And that's going to take some time as well. Okay. How are specials being handled K through 3? I think I answered that one already. They'll be push-in, except for phys ed. We do want to make use of outdoors as often as we can in a comfortable situation when it's possible. And that means a music class at some point may go outdoors as well, and that will also impact what can be seen from home, and if there are other arrangements that have to be made for that day in the special area. And the principals will handle that, as will Mr. Reynolds and other department directors. Okay, same question about 100% distance learning. Will he have to be on the computer all day observing what's going on in the classroom? I will tell you, in terms of attendance, there will be no requirement that the child sit in front of a screen all day. So although there's a benefit to them being there and watching what goes on at certain times of day, what I don't want to become a belief is that a child is locked to that screen, and if they walk away, they're going to be held negatively accountable for that. That is not the case. So we will do some work in terms of talking about how lessons are structured, particularly at the K through 3 level when the attention span is a little bit shorter than when they're in high school, how to structure some of those lessons accordingly to build in some of that time. But at any point, if a child walks away, there won't be any penalty, and it will be something that's certainly understood by the teacher and by the administrators in the building. Okay, I'm trying to go quickly here, and feel free to keep at it in the chat. Can a family decide to start the year virtually and then transition when they decide it's comfortable to come back into the in-person setting? So this was a big topic of discussion here. I do not necessarily want to start with, once you pick virtual, you're locked in. And I know there are commitments that are being asked for by a lot of districts. What we have decided to do here is gather I'm going to call it a soft commitment, but one that we're going to ask that you adhere to if you make this decision, because we are going to plan our phases and plan our class rosters around what you tell me if you decide to go full virtual. So the choices on the form were for the month of September, for the first quarter, for the first half of the year, or beyond half the year. Now, if the circumstances change, and let's say, not that I expect this to happen anytime soon or overnight, a vaccine comes out and the virus just magically picks another planet to inhabit. Well, of course, we go to phase 3 immediately, everybody comes back, and the virtual wouldn't be needed anymore, and we wouldn't force anybody not to be in school. I want the kids to be in school, but I want them to be in school safely. So to do that, we're asking for information from parents that allow us to plan accordingly. So can you transition? Yes. If you decide, I want to come back immediately, I hear it's going really well, there may be a delay there because we have to make sure that we have our classes situated accordingly, and we're going to ask that you be understanding in that regard. If you decide at any point you want to go from hybrid to all virtual, well, that's a quick shift. So we can accommodate that a little bit more quickly. So there are going to be places here we're going to ask for your understanding and your cooperation, and understanding that we have so much to implement here at the same time. Our goal, and I'll use the two words over and over again, safety and flexibility. And obviously educational integrity, rigor, all of that comes as well. But those two concepts have to be part of this plan throughout.
So, Mr. Polanski,
Yep.
a chat question came through to me that I think is more to what you were speaking about. The question is, if a parent chooses full distance learning, can it be for the whole year, or will they at some point have to come back in person? In other words, if they choose to stay remote for the whole year, will they have that option?
Right now, I'll say it depends on the situation. So much as I mentioned before, if we get to the point where, and I don't see it happening anytime soon, to be honest with you, but if the virus was no longer a concern and it had been eradicated completely, there would be no reason for us to continue the virtual model. I do not see that happening. So what I did have is, by the time we get to phase 3, initially the plan I had built in there, once we hit phase 3, everybody comes back and virtual stops. I pulled that out because I can't predict circumstances. So we will be as flexible as possible there. So if there is still remnants of this virus out there and people don't feel comfortable, or there are medically at-risk folks out there, either the students or people in the household, I do not want to put families in a position where they're forced to put their child back into school when they're not comfortable doing so. So in most circumstances, we will allow them to continue. Okay. All right, then it's a similar question. At the moment, I don't feel comfortable sending my daughter in. For the time being, can she continue to learn remotely? Absolutely. Okay, kindergarten screening. This question is, when will kindergarten screening take place? Right now, we are hoping to begin kindergarten screening in a socially distant, sort of barrier-generated setting, a barrier-infused setting in August, and we'll probably have to continue the process into September. Kindergarten screening is not mandated. It doesn't have to be completed before the children begin the school year. So the screenings will continue for as long as needed after the school year begins. Me too, but my computer isn't working, so I'm on my phone. That's from you, Mrs. Kanzer. I'm going to ignore that one. Okay. Will windows be kept open? Utilize outdoor class. If you take a look at the ventilation section, it's in the facilities/PPE section of the plan. Whenever possible, we're going to work in outdoor air circulation. We also have to make sure that our doors are supervised and that we are not compromising safety in that respect. But we have done a lot of work this summer installing air scrubbers, which are basically filters on air handling units that scrub the air, for lack of a better term. We have replaced and will continue to replace on a routine basis our HEPA filters that are as highly MERV rated as possible. The higher the rating, the more it filters out. We are going to utilize the cross ventilation, i.e. windows open, in some places doors open, to keep that outdoor air circulating. What we have to make sure is that we are not recirculating. We're not, you know how in your car you have a setting that you can just recirculate the air that's in the car. That's bad. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that any aerosol particles that are in the air that are no good are flushed out and out of the building, as a matter of fact. We'll be checking our air handling systems routinely. If there is a location in the building and we have a device that actually measures the airflow, cubic feet per minute, any device, any measurement that is not acceptable in terms of that measurement per person in the room, that room will be taken offline. So we're doing a lot of work to make sure that that is not going to be a problem for the spaces that we're using.
What was he saying? Talking about checking the air moving through the room and making sure it gets recirculated, like refreshed a certain amount of time. I don't know how they're going to do that.
But why does that affect the virtual people?
It does.
Okay. What will an ICT class look like? Integrated co-teaching class is going to look very much like a regular elementary classroom. So the same as it should, least restrictive environment. It'll run like a classroom, just a regular grade level classroom. Okay, what happens if after a few weeks we decide to have our children no longer attend classes? I assume that means in school. You can make that shift very quickly from hybrid to remote. We're just asking that you let us know. This also works if a child is out for another reason and can attend in-school classes on their designated day as part of the hybrid model, and they would like to participate at home remotely, they can do that. Doesn't mean that they're absent. They can participate remotely and still be recorded as present in the classroom. So this does provide a little bit more flexibility. At the end of the day, you may never see a snow day again. Which would be very sad for me, just because I really enjoy making those announcements once every 3 years. Okay. Oh, shoot. Okay, what are the metrics and the timeline the district will use to decide if you will go to phase 2? All right, a couple of comments there, and that's an excellent question. We had a time in there, and I immediately pulled it out because to say it's going to take us 2 weeks to get to phase 2, I don't know that. So the general metrics are, and this is what the governor is supposed to be using. It depends on what he says when he gets up the day he makes the announcement. But the 5% positive test rate in a region is going to determine whether or not he says schools can open with your plans or everything is going to work remotely across the region. Once schools open, let's say right now, if you've been following, most of the regions in New York State have been anywhere between 0.5% and 1.5%. So it does look like at this point, unless something drastic happens in the next couple of days or next few weeks, because it can change based on these metrics, that schools will be permitted to open according to the plans that have been established by the district. 5% is that benchmark. If they open at under 5% and at some point the region hits 9%, that's a high number, schools will shut down. So I sit on I'm the vice president of the Suffolk County School Superintendents Association. Myself, my executive board members have been communicating routinely with the Suffolk County Health Department, have asked for additional specifics, which they can dictate or determine for school districts in general. But we will have to be looking at A, what's happening in our own community, and B, what's happening among the families in our schools. So I can't tell you exactly what that measurement is going to be when a school shuts down, but I will tell you that if there are, I would be concerned if there were more than one child in a building that had tested positive at any one time. If you look through the plan, you'll notice that the trigger point is a positive test. It's not just symptoms. Symptoms are not going to trigger quarantining or any major response. It's going to be the results of a positive test. If a child or a staff member tests positive, we're going to then work with the Suffolk County Health Department to engage in contact tracing. Once that is complete, any individuals, it'll happen quickly too. So if a child in a second grade classroom tests positive, anybody in contact with that child in that classroom is now going to be told to stay home, quarantine for 2 weeks. And the only way to return to school is with Suffolk County Department of Health approval, which will involve, if there's no symptoms, it makes it a little bit easier. But if symptoms develop, then a healthcare provider is going to be involved as well. Hard to say how many will trigger a full school shutdown, but I have to tell you, if we're dealing with multiple children in the same building, I will be hard-pressed not to shut that building down for a period of 2 weeks. But that remains to be seen. That's not hard and fast, but that's where my head is right now, and that will further take shape as the conversations I have. I expect a flow chart from the Suffolk County Department of Health very shortly. I have asked them to please make sure that they've read our plan. Please make sure that they've read this New York State Department of Health's plan and the SED guidance so that we can do this in a collaborative and together fashion. And we have been speaking with other districts as well, just to make sure that we are as close to being on the same page as possible. Will twins be placed in the same class to minimize pathogen exposure? Normally, we would not do that. Under the current circumstances, we will be more likely to do that. It's not something that permeates the district, but in this particular situation, unless there is an extraordinary reason not to do that, and we'll consult with parents in this regard, that would be preferred. Just like students in the same family can sit in the same seat on the bus, it does minimize exposure, as this parent points out. Are you looking to have permanent aides in kindergarten rather than shared? This would minimize teacher contact with twice the amount of students per day. And that is something we are going to try and work out as we have student cohorts. We're going to try and work that out with the staff as well. Again, the cohort concept is to keep same together for periods of time such that A, you're exposed to the same people and you're more comfortable, and B, if something does happen, it's not going to impact, not necessarily impact more than that one cohort. Or a cohort can be defined as the entire group in the building on that day. It can be defined as a group of students on a bus. It can be defined as a group of students in the same classroom. So depending on when and where something occurs in terms of a positive test, the less contact that positive has had with other people, the less it's going to be intrusive into the general educational environment. Okay, universal pre-K. I assume that the question is, what about universal pre-K? I think that is about the, I think that is about the model that the learning model that the children will follow. It looks like at this point, UPK is going to follow a, we're still working on that. But right now, I think we're still in the 2 to 3 day cohort model. One of the concerns was transportation. We're taking a very conservative approach to routing and transportation. That'll be determined in the next week or so. We're working on trying to bring them in full day, but I don't necessarily think that we're going to be able to do that. So that'll work on the cohort model that the other grades 1 through 6 are working on, and scope will be in communication with UPK parents regarding that schedule. Okay. What if a kindergarten child gets sick? This really applies to anyone, and I have to get this message across, and I'm glad this question was asked, because I can make the statement: if there is a symptom, you need to keep the child home. The symptom may be nothing. It may be an allergy. It may be strep throat. It may be a cold, the flu, anything but COVID, but we don't know that until it's confirmed, for the most part, by a healthcare provider, or until time plays it out. If a parent puts a child on a bus, if a child comes to school sick, that could impact the entire bus, the entire classroom, the entire building. So if a kindergarten child gets sick, they must stay home. We will not necessarily quarantine an entire classroom. We won't if it's just a matter of, it's very easy to panic. I heard somebody sneezing in the back of the room. I heard coughing, and it was repeated coughing. Our action will begin if a positive test is in place. A child comes in with a fever of above 100.0, they're not going to get in the building. They'll be sent to a designated room under supervision of the nurse to be picked up. But there may be some symptoms that aren't recognized, that we're relying on parents to really do what they need to do to help us and keep children with symptoms of any sort. If a child is ill, they need to stay home. There are no awards, there are no attendance recognitions here. You can participate remotely. You can still get the credit for the attendance. Okay, this one we handled already. If I choose to start my kindergartner on the remote plan by the deadline, will I have an option to attend in person if things improve? Yes, but there may be, we're asking for that commitment for a period of time, because again, that may impact how quickly we can phase. But there will be, obviously, we don't want to keep children out of school for extended periods, but again, keep in mind when you choose the remote option, not that we want to keep children from coming back, but in terms of our planning, we're going to ask for a commitment for a period of time. Good question. Well, they're all good questions, but this one hasn't been asked before. Will kindergartners have a chance to play at recess, or will they continue to socially distance? Yes and yes. Recess is an important part of the kids' day. What may happen here is there may be fewer kids, fewer children on a particular playground or in a specific area at the same time. This is going to take some training. Staff is going to have to really work with the kids to help them understand the importance of social distancing. They're going to have to help desensitize them to the mask wearing, and we're going to have to ask the parents for help there as well. There are methods that are, I'll say, research supported, for lack of a better term, to help the little children become more accustomed to wearing a mask. But they also need to be accustomed to staying away from each other, and that's not typically what they do. And I will tell you that we've been able to pressure test a little bit this summer with the extended year program that's running at Woodhull. There are ways that our elementary teachers are very creative, and it's something that we just have to basically help them routinize, get part of their daily routines. But they will have recess. We will encourage the outdoor time, and certainly the social distancing will be a part of that. What we can't do, and what I can't do, and I have to be honest here, I can't guarantee anything. Little kids, big kids, adults don't always do what they're supposed to do 100% of the time. So there may be a period of time where two kids who are supposed to be 6 feet apart are not. That's why we are asking for the ongoing mask wearing. And again, I can answer this question if it comes up later, with appropriate mask breaks involved. I know there are districts that because they have kids wearing masks, that they're not adhering to the social distancing as tightly as we are. I just know how unpredictable people are, and not intentionally. It's just the way we are social animals, for lack of a better term, and we want to be around each other. And it's very difficult for children who are so used to playing and being on top of each other to learn to be a little bit further apart. So we're going to work with them on that. Okay, rephrased, how will classes be balanced in regard to gender, race, ethnicity, and academics? Something we look at every year, and that will be addressed at the building level as it typically would. Will outdoor spaces be used as classrooms on good weather days? And again, I leave that to the building principals and teachers, but the idea is to utilize outdoor spaces as often as possible when appropriate for student learning. We can't use tents. That was one of the things that we had looked into, and we do need building permits or different types of permits for tents, and they have to be appropriately ventilated, and it just became a very costly venture. But there are, specifically in certain buildings, they come to mind, spaces that can be used on good weather days, particularly at the beginning of the year if it's not too hot. Okay, I think we addressed this one. Will specials like music and physical education offer remote instruction as well, or will those only be done in school? And I'll say music, physical education, to the extent possible, will be available remotely, and if not, we will look for alternatives. But those are the phys ed I can think of as the tricky part, particularly if the children are outside. Okay, it's an interesting question and a good one. How should we navigate friendships in other cohorts? Does the school have guidance? So what I would never want to do is discourage or encourage or discourage friendships and play dates outside of the school setting. Unfortunately, our extracurriculars are going to be taking place in general in a somewhat limited manner. And if, like I said, little kids need to be around each other. They need to learn how to socialize. So I don't necessarily want to dictate the terms for what happens outside the school setting. But what I would say is, if that child is in contact with a child from any cohort and the second child or one of those two children ends up with symptoms and tests positive, we need to have that information shared with us promptly. That is outlined in the plan. I do have to rely on that information coming from the families of the children involved. So again, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying yes or no, but again, as a parent, my kids are a little older, 24 and 21, they don't understand the social distancing thing, so I can only imagine how the 5-year-olds are going to react to this, but we just need to continue to reinforce proper practice here for the little guys in particular. Okay. This is a great question. Once seated, will students be allowed to take off their masks? So the answer here is, the plan talks about mask breaks in multiple places. When the kids are sitting at their desks and they are more than 6 feet apart and they are wearing their masks and they have those 3-sided barriers around them and they are working independently, and this is again with the help of the teacher, that would be a time where a mask break can be taken and the mask can be taken off temporarily. If it's not uncomfortable for them, they should keep the masks on, but that may be the time for a mask break, with the students clearly understanding that they cannot get up and move around the classroom at that point. And that again will be done in a grade level appropriate manner. So we have to work in mask breaks throughout the school day. Anecdotally speaking, my office is in Jack Abrams. I was going upstairs to look at one of our model classrooms in the upstairs wing here. I was wearing a mask at the time. I am not in the worst shape in the world. I got to the top of the stairs and I was winded as can be because that mask does take your breath away. We need to give these kids and our staff time to breathe and take that mask off, but it needs to be done safely. Okay, will you be providing face shields and PPE to teachers? Okay, so let me answer the question on face shields first. Face shields are not appropriate for use in a school building. And the reason being they can be worn in addition to a mask, but they do not appropriately protect against the aerosol particles because most of the face shields that I have seen are not form-fitting and they are open at the bottom and anything can come under, out, and through. So face shields are not Department of Health approved for use in school settings by staff or students. Teachers will also have, what we'll be doing here is we'll be providing students with a mask and we'll have plenty of backup masks available. So if a student arrives at school without a mask, they're not going to end up not coming into school just simply because they forgot the mask. We're going to have the same available for teachers. And there may be situations like our nurses will have the N95 masks. They will have additional PPE available to them because they will be dealing with some things that the standard teacher or staff member will not. Okay, I have 2 children, one in elementary and one in middle school. Will they be hybrid learning on the same days? Was this taken into consideration in the same families in separate schools? The answer to that is 100% absolutely. We will not have any situations where an older sibling and a younger sibling are in school and at home on different days. And if that does happen by chance because we missed it, one phone call is all it's going to take to switch that. They need to be together because in many cases the older sibling will watch the younger sibling on the days that they are at home. So, and we did the very best we could, and I think very completely. We have our cohorts mapped out already, and even if siblings do not necessarily have the same last name, they are grouped together. So the last names that you see in the plan, Appendix A, there may be some modifications to that to accommodate just what this parent had asked. So it's an excellent question. Okay, can you please explain second grade for students in special education and the services they are set to be receiving? I'm going to defer that question to either Mrs. Rich or the building principal because that really has to be answered specific to that child because not all children based on their IEPs receive the same services. So I'll ask that you follow up there, or I can certainly mention that question was asked because it's got to be specific to the student. All right, what is age appropriate? Mask breaks, and again, this is going to be that meaning that different grade levels, different age students are going to have different needs in terms of mask breaks, but they're all going to need them. And I just gave you an example of a situation where it can happen. It may also happen in an outdoor setting where they're well beyond 6 feet apart. But the default setting will be the mask wearing because kids move very quickly, and we want to make sure that they're not, that Department of Health actually said that young children need to be on top of each other at less than 6 feet for 10 minutes before something can happen. Maybe that's the average, I don't know, but I can tell you all it takes is one child walking to the desk of another and one sneeze, one cough. To me, that seems that it can be very easily spread that way. But anytime that they are apart is ripe for a mask break. The teacher lays out the conditions and it is understood by the students. So they'll be more often than maybe you realize at this point, but we do want to make it clear that wearing the mask is the default setting. If we choose the fully virtual option, will there be a specific class teacher for those students and their own assignments, or will those students just watch what the hybrid kids are watching every day? So right now it's the latter, but there may be a situation, and this is where, as I mentioned before, safety and flexibility. If that many students at a particular grade level select the all remote option and we have conversations with parents, this will be done in consultation with parents, there may be a situation where we look to do just that and assign a teacher to the remote setting. And it's certainly not something I would rule out. We've had those conversations here, but I just can't promise it at this point. Right now, we have about 140 who have requested the full virtual option, and I can tell you they really span the grade levels. It's almost, there's no one grade level that was more represented than another, but we're going to look at that very carefully. During hybrid days, how many children do you expect will be in a classroom any given day? In general, I'm going to say that the maximum will be about 15. And I will tell you, thankful to my staff here, when I say on their hands and knees, measuring every square foot in every classroom, it happened, and that's what we're basing our placement and our desk positioning on. I noticed on the plan that the district can potentially close if COVID positive infection rate is greater than 9%. How will this be monitored by the district? Also, is this inclusive of kids and all school faculty? So, okay, the 9%, as I mentioned before, when it hits that number is more the governor's regional number. So if the Long Island region hits 9%, we could have no infections in Huntington and we will have to shut down. But along the other side of things, if the regional positive infection rate is 1%, and we are doing contact tracing or participating, or the county health department with our help is doing the contact tracing, and we notice a cluster of positive cases in a specific building or in the district, we may have to take action independently of any regional metric. And I can't really specify at this point exactly what it would take, because it depends on where the kids have been and what the results of the contact tracing present to us. But the 9% is more the governor's number. If it hits it regionally, then every school district is going to shut its doors in every school. Okay, it's another good question. How has each grade's curriculum been changed at all to accommodate any subjects that weren't covered as fulsomely when we suddenly switched to virtual learning last year? This has been laborious. I'd like to call it a labor of love, but we recognize that there have been a lot of things cut off as of March 13th. And it's the last date I actually remember, because it's been one long day since then. But every curriculum at every grade level has been looked at, and there are going to be modifications made. And we're going to have to, diagnostic teaching. We don't certainly want to look at, every diagnostic assessment in the book, but we have to be very sensitive to things that kids miss in the fall. And we've looked at our core and, in some cases, elective area curricula so that we can do a little bit more at the beginning of the year to help reacclimate, to help diagnose what might have been missed in the spring, and things are going to take a little bit longer for that reason. Speaking on the secondary level, there may be subjects that are not continuous in nature, where it doesn't have to happen as much, and in certain cases it'll have to happen to a much greater extent. I think to a certain extent that's going to apply to the elementary level as well. Okay, this one I answered. Will there be more opportunities for outdoor classrooms and learning? I'm going to move quickly here because I see I have 120 underneath. Virtual environment requires a tremendous amount of parental navigation and corralling to have the child sit. How does the school expect parents who are working to support at-home learning? It's going to be a challenge. I don't have a perfect answer there. I wish I did. But we will work with you if there are accommodations or things that we can suggest for that individual child. And I will certainly suggest that there be conversations with the teacher in terms of how to best support that child. Some will do it very well, some won't do it well at all, and that's where we have to work together to find a way to get it done. I'm going to read it. It's thank you very much for organizing, putting together a well thought out reopening plan that puts our students and staff safety first. That's our goal. Again, safety and flexibility. I want to be able to anticipate everything that happens here to the nth degree. I can't tell you that that's possible, but that's our goal, and we're not going to let that goal out of our sight. Do parents have the option of in-person or virtual in kindergarten? Can you change during the year? I answered that, so kindergarten will have the same full remote option. And I understand that parent considerations may be, I can't do the full remote if both parents are working and if I don't have a childcare situation. I do understand that it's part of your decision making, but we're going to do the best we can to support either way. Will the children be able to, will the children who are virtual be able to participate in real time? Absolutely. Has there been any discussion about bringing in special education inclusion students, 1 to 3 students full time? Inclusion for students who have speech, language disabilities, and or ADHD, ADD, virtual learning is virtually impossible. I understand that. We were looking to bring in many more groups every day. We just couldn't do it based on the numbers. So again, it goes back to the safety factor. We have to make sure that we can do what we do in a socially distanced manner. And we will certainly look at that when we transition from phase 1 to phase 2. I mentioned during the board meeting that I have outlined concrete phases. I want to make it clear that if we determine that there's a phase 1.5, we'll have a phase 1.5. So if we can do this in a grade level manner, just based on numbers, we'll do it. Nothing is hard and fast here as long as we can do it safely. I just don't want to put out we want to treat kids, we want to give kids equal access and want to make everything accessible to all kids. So we may have to do this incrementally, but like I said, we're going to do what we can do to get as many kids as possible back into the more full-time setting. It just may take a little bit more time or less time depending on the outside or inside circumstances. All right, will dual language programs be taking place this year for kindergarten? Yes, they will. The selection will be taking place in the same manner as it has been. I do not expect dual language to be impacted other than in the same manner that all classes are being impacted. Will children be required to wear masks outside at recess? Just remember, at recess, they're moving very quickly, and it's all too easy for them to be within that 6-foot distancing. That may be a time for mask breaks, but the teachers need to make sure that if they say, okay, kids, take off your mask, that the socially distant piece is not going to be compromised. So sometimes, more often than not, yes, but sometimes there may be a break involved at that time. If when the students are all home because of a full school closure, will it be 9:20 to 3:40 as a full school day, and how will that be taught? Will it be like the spring and on Google Classroom, or will the teacher be teaching live? All right, so if the entire district shuts down, there is in Appendix A, the second section, I believe it's number 2, a full distance learning model. The schedule will change. If it's one building or one classroom, the schedule will be maintained as it will the same schedule that we start with at the beginning of the year. That full school closure model is if every school closed because we've hit that 9% regionally, or if we have to shut down our district for any other reason, we will shift the schedule. I looked into changing start times. Transportation did not allow us to do it. Not that they didn't allow us, we couldn't coordinate the routes that way, but only under a full district closure will the school start time be shifted. And if something changes in that regard, we would let you know well in advance. This is a hard question to answer, and I wish I could tell you as soon as possible, but in your mind, how soon do you think you would move into phase 2 if everything is going seemingly well? So 2 things we're going to look at in general, or from 1 to 2 or anywhere in between. We're going to be looking at the regional and local metrics, positive test cases, etc. We're also going to be looking at how well our safety measures are working, and that's mask wearing, social distancing, use of barriers, and just the students and staff settling into their routines in a safe manner. Initially, we had a 2-week time period in mind. I can't promise that because there's so many things, so many variables that are going to contribute to this, but understand that we would like kids in school as soon as possible, but it has to be done safely. Okay, if the kindergartner starts the year remote, is the plan to have them in front of a screen watching a simulcast of class all day? I answered that one already. What will happen if younger students cannot keep their masks on all day? Answered that one already. I'm moving quickly and certainly available to answer questions between these meetings if you have them. Okay, question is, if I choose the full-time distance learning, is it for the whole year, or is my child mandated to go back in person at some point? Okay, same thing. It may very well be a full-year distance learning program. Unless something magically changes with this virus, which I don't see happening, the option will be there for the full year. Can my child be virtual, still taught by a teacher? Yes. We talked about age-appropriate mask breaks. We talked about movement from phases, between phases. But what is the process of notification to parents when someone is tested positive? So once the positive test is come to the attention of, now you'll notice at the end of the plan there is a section on points of contact. So the building principals and Diana Rich, who is our Director of Pupil Personnel Services, Special Education, they are designated points of contact. Maybe the first that you contact, it may be a building principal. If you have a child at Flower Hill, contact the building principal, positive case. My next move is to contact the County Department of Health so we can initiate the contact tracing process. Certainly right off the bat, I want to know what bus that child was on, what classroom that child was in, and immediate notification as possible, the children in those classrooms and in that bus will receive a call, and they will be told that their child has to stay home for 14 days in quarantine. So it's not something we want, but it's something that we're going to have to do. We will cordon off that classroom. We will probably wait, under most circumstances, 24 hours to clean and sanitize it, and that is actually a Department of Health recommendation, because we don't want our staff in the room, our cleaning staff, our buildings and ground staff in the room when there's still an active infection after 24 hours, lessens it considerably. And then once the cleaning takes place, it'll be open for business, but the students in that room where someone tested positive will not be permitted back in until after the 14-day quarantine period is over. One thing I did put in the plan, just to throw out there, that the period of isolation, once you're sick, may be less than the quarantine period, because the isolation period, you've already had the time to get sick. There are a number of conditions that must be met, but we really need to rely on our healthcare provider system and also on the County Department of Health to help us in terms of allowing folks to return in this type of situation. But the quarantine and contact tracing are essential. As for Google Classroom, does the district have its own G Suite account? Yes, we have our own Google account. Will there be a longer live class? 45 minutes for a full 6-hour day didn't seem like enough for older children. Yes, please look at the appendix A in the plan. The virtual, and this is it's a double-edged sword here. The virtual program is going to look like a regular school day. The other side of that is the question about, well, if the younger children, how can they work with that much screen time? So, there are going to have to be breaks involved, but yes, the schedule is going to follow the typical school schedule, unlike just 45 minutes for a 6-hour day. Like its own Google account, we'll block certain websites on the Chromebook. Still the same, we use GoGuardian here. It's a very restrictive. We have to actually release sites. The default setting is, if there's any doubt, you can't access it. Will students be sharing desks with other students that they are rotating days with? For example, will there be 24 desks but only 12 kids at a time, so each has their own desk? Or will there be 12 desks and a child that goes Monday, Wednesday will share a desk with a child that goes Tuesday, Thursday? So the answer there is they will be sharing desks. The cohorts are Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, Friday. And after the Wednesday cohort shifts to the Thursday cohort, there is going to be a full-fledged cleaning, sanitizing, disinfecting of that classroom. And we have that built into the plan. As a matter of fact, the only reason I did not use Wednesday as that rotating day is because there are Wednesday is not the alternating day, because there are 3 Monday holidays over the first 2 months, and I didn't want those students shortchanged. But just rest assured that there will be a thorough cleansing, sanitizing, disinfecting between cohorts, so that there will be, in order to get the desks spaced out accordingly, I'm using my hands here, you can't even see them, there will be there will be only a certain number of desks allowed in the room. I believe it's a maximum of 15 in most classrooms. How many children will be in each cohort? So at the primary level, you have just about half of the school in at the same time. So again, more often than not, these children are going to be limited to their classrooms. So the cohort is that group of students in the building at the same time, but it's also more specifically the students in the same classroom. So like I said, you're talking about a maximum of 15. If there are twins, it could be 16, but I don't see that happening that often. And in many cases, because of the number of students who are choosing to go full virtual, it may be less than 15. Specials are usually on a weekly schedule. Will it be rotating in person versus virtual every other week? So both cohort get specials in person. Yes, we're going to do our best to make sure that the schedule, that's why we're working with designated days of the week as opposed to AB, so that everybody gets their fair amount of time with in-person specials. Can a child go from virtual back to classroom? We discussed that. Will there be any different setup for drop-off in the morning, especially if buses aren't used as much or at all? I'll speak to buses briefly. we really don't have the legal authority to take a school bus seat away from anyone. Can we ask questions about who might not be using the bus? Yes, but if you come back to me 2 days later and say, I want my bus seat, I have to give it to you. There's no legal right to take bus seats away from anyone, so we've kind of stayed away from the transportation. But there may be fewer children on buses, because I know I have spoken to parents who have just simply told me, I'm going to drive my students to school every day. Will there be a different setup? Yes, there will be different, they'll be in and outdoors, and there may be different egresses and ingresses used just to make sure that the social distancing is not as challenging as it would be if they were all walking in the front door. And that's going to require a greater degree of supervision, but there's also fewer students in the building. There will be a temperature scanner at any door that's used as an entryway. But the setup will be dictated by the building principals, and again, the goal is social distancing and management of people coming in close to the same time. And if we need to stagger the buses a little bit, we may have that option. I can't promise that. All right, what is push-in? I'm sorry, I'm making assumptions here that the educational jargon is always easy to pick up, and it's not the case. Push-in means instead of a child, for example, going into, leaving the general classroom and going to the art room, the art teacher would push into the general classroom, and the students would participate in the activities in that same classroom. Well, outdoor activities take place in the colder months. There's no reason that some can't take place in the colder months within reason. Outdoor air is a positive regardless of the time of year, but we also don't want icicles forming on children's clothing when they're outside. So we're going to do this responsibly. Drop off and pickup. How will children maintain social distancing during drop off and pickup given the amount of parents and staff present and transportation in the multiple forms? Sort of answered that already, but in this situation, parents will not be let past a certain point. We cannot have them in the building. There will be multiple ingresses and egresses used. And again, I'm going to leave that specifically to, we have three elementary primary school buildings that look just like each other. And the third one looks a little bit differently. And I'm sorry, the fourth one looks a little bit different than the other three. So it may be different. And there may be different processes set up just simply because of the numbers and where the classrooms are situated. So I'm going to let the principals handle that specifically, but understand multiple doors. Okay, I appreciate that you involved the teachers in designing this plan. How are they feeling about the hybrid model? Do they have enough support in class to engage the kids with in-person and online at the same time? And I'm going to be honest with you, the staff is anxious. I am anxious. We're all anxious because this is something we really have not done to the degree we're about to take it on. They have been part of the planning process. They have questions. I'm going to try and work through their questions with them, and I have to continue to take their feedback in terms of what works best. We did demonstrate the technology for the subcommittees that were involved in our planning process. A lot of good work there. It does work, and it will work well. Our professional development process is going to have to take on a different tone and more intensively in support of teachers and giving teachers time to collaborate and plan with each other. One of the changes we made, if you weren't in attendance at our board meeting the other night, is the calendar at the beginning of the year has changed. Students, it's going to start on Wednesday, September 9th instead of Tuesday, September 8th. And we have situated 3 consecutive conference days for staff on Thursday the 3rd, Friday the 4th, and Tuesday the 8th, not consecutive in terms of calendar days, but in terms of work days, so that we can do a lot of the heavy lift last minute planning, but the professional development is going to be ongoing throughout August and throughout the school year so that the support is there. And they're going to have to, certainly if somebody tells me this is what they need, we're going to try and get it for them. Okay, for specials, if my student is never in school on Friday and art is on Friday, will she never go to art in person? And the answer to that is she will absolutely go to art in person, and that schedule will be manipulated by the building principals to make sure that everybody has equitable access to the special area in-person time. What determines if your child will go 2 or 3 times per week? Are there any priorities if the parent is a healthcare worker? And it's simply an alternating week schedule. So there are 2 cohorts at the elementary level. One group goes 3 days one week and 2 days the next, then 3, then 2, then 3, then 2. At this point, there are no priorities. Everybody's going to get the same amount of time in school. Will every child have their own desk in the classroom? That we answered. There will be sharing of desks among cohorts, but there will be a thorough cleaning between the two cohort presences in the buildings. Will masks be required when the students are outside of the building for class? And I'm going to say default setting again, yes, but there may be mask breaks more easily built in outside. Will there be group or partner work in the classroom? And if so, how will that look? And I will tell you that group or partner work is going to be much restricted, at least for the onset of the school year. We are looking into some of the translucent barriers that would allow reading groups, etc., but we do have to limit that time working on top of each other in groups or partner work. Thank you for the comment to this parent who appreciates the plan and the work we're doing here. All right, since special classes are full-time in-person and others have to choose between the hybrid and distance options, where the students who are meant to be in an integrated IEP, typical classroom thought of when the cohorts were created, the answer to that is yes, but just due to the sheer numbers, and there were other groups who wanted to include in that everyday model as well, it just became a challenge in terms of the safety factor. The special class setting was a lot easier because those classes are sometimes 7, 8 in size to begin with, so it just made sense and we had the room in the classrooms. If the school is relying on individuals to get tested on their own, if someone comes into the school with symptoms and doesn't get tested for COVID, when will they be allowed back? They will be allowed back upon, at that point, if the symptoms are there, the tests, we may not take that child back in until we have either confirmation of a negative test and also symptoms being gone for a period of time, and certainly if the child tests positive, there are other restrictions there. But we do have to rely on healthcare providers to give us the information, or Department of Health releasing from quarantine before we release somebody from, or before we allow somebody back, return to school protocol. So there is going to have to be testing done at that point. And without the testing confirmation, the child probably will not be let back in. And I say probably because I'm still waiting on that final word flow chart from the Suffolk County Department of Health, but that is where my head is right now. So if you ask me today, the test is mandatory. And what I can see is some parents may not be happy with that, and it's just seasonal allergies, but I don't know that, and nor does anybody else who's around that child. So this is a comfort factor for those in the building as well. The test is important. Max number of students in a classroom, 1st to 3rd grade. Again, 15 is generally the max. There may be fewer based on the number who choose virtual. Hours for the kindergarten day, same as for the building, 9:20 to 3:40. We talked about age-appropriate mask breaks. But if you have work during school time, yet you want your child to study virtually, there are just some things that are going to be more difficult to accommodate. That's one of them. Okay. Will younger students be able to have options of where they learn in a classroom? I know many early childhood rooms often have students go back and forth between learning in a rug and at their tables or desks. Unfortunately, under the circumstances, that movement will be somewhat restricted. It's not ideal in a learning situation, but in terms of the safety factor, we've got to keep the kids in most situations in place. I appreciate what you just said about no negativity for missing part of a live session. I am concerned about balancing my work schedule with facilitating the lessons for my son. He needed my help to do everything last year, so he had to complete things when he could take breaks from work. I appreciate if there's some flexibility in completing assignments, and forgiveness if he misses something. And forgive me if I'm speaking too fast. And that is the idea. We want to be able to address individual circumstances as comprehensively as we can. I cannot promise that everything can be accommodated, but that is definitely a conversation between parent and teacher to see what we can do to assist. That's our goal here, is going to be to help you. There are going to be situations where we can't do exactly what we'd love to do for you, but understand that we're in this with you, and if we can make an accommodation and it makes sense to do that, understand the staff is going to be, we're all going to be under an extraordinary amount of pressure to get every individual need taken care of, but I do want to make it clear that flexibility is a big part of our process here. Okay. For kids who receive IEP-related services at school, OT, PT, will they have to schedule their services on the 2 days they attend in person? provided an example. So I'm concerned about missing too much time in the classroom. We did talk about this, and this is something that I would definitely suggest talking to Mrs. Rich or Mrs. Vaughn's about, because the bottom line is we have the same concern that if these services occur on the days that they're in school, they could be pulled out more often than they're in class, and we don't want to do that. So please do not hesitate to have those conversations. Okay, windows and doors open. What is the safety? Again, we're not talking about outside doors necessarily, but we are talking about achieving cross ventilation, and we have to find that balance. So we want to get the outdoor air circulating in, but we also have to, again, maintain the safety and security of our school buildings. What is the process if a student or teacher tests positive in the class or in school? I mentioned that before. When will phase 2 begin? Spoke to that. HEPA filter 13 or more. So this person is asking about the HEPA filter MERV rating. They're not all 13s. Some of them are 11s. They are appropriate for the situations that they are placed in. And again, we are measuring the cubic feet per minute in every location. In places where we can have 13 filters and the devices can handle them, they will be there. Okay, what is the door safety measure? That's all about supervision and making sure once supervision is not there that they are locked. When will students find out who their teacher is? Along the same timeline as every year, later this month, end of August. The principals return on August 24th, I believe, full time. What happens if a teacher tests positive for COVID? Are there precautions, and will there be teachers available to take over said teacher's duties? Will there be some classes 100% remote because the teacher filed for medical exemption based on CDC guidelines? Thanks. And the bottom line is we have a number of daily recurring substitutes that will be able to step in. The problem with a teacher who tests positive is that teacher will not be in school to teach those students on the days that they are permitted to be in school. So some arrangements are going to have to be made there, and we will have to make use of the additional staff that we will have on hand. Without testing, we cannot tell how safe the school is. Many are asymptomatic. Again, I do not disagree with that, but we are also not permitted to do testing on site. Can you require a child sent home with symptoms be tested? Yes, we can do that. How will a building know if a child or teacher tests positive? And once the positive test is out there, I mentioned this before, the communication and the contact tracing will begin immediately, and the communication to those in the building or certainly right away to those in that specific location in the building will be informed. Okay, asking about the school metric, like I said, my head right now is if there is more than one positive case in the building, my inclination, again, waiting for the Department of Health to put that flow chart in our hands, that would be probably my trigger to either shutting down most, if not all, of that building. I understand the school will not be testing teachers periodically. However, will there be any ways in which school facilitate access to testing for teachers and students? And yes, that's a relationship that we have in place. There is a testing site that is very close to our high school building that we can refer people to. That is something that we are obviously, and we have done it. This is the same type of situation. We had a testing site set up at the high school in March because of the cases in the community, and that's something that same agency would be available to work with us in that regard. Will cohort B return to class if a child in cohort A tests positive? What about the teacher? So the cohorts are separate just to avoid the mixing of the cohorts and one impacting the other. If the teacher has been in contact with both cohorts, that may impact both cohorts. So it's less a student issue than a staff issue. Okay, if a student gets sent home with symptoms, will siblings be sent home and their classes notified until cleared by the Suffolk County Health Department? Just because somebody is sent home with symptoms, that is not a trigger for sending notifications to every corner of the school district. It is the positive test that's the trigger. So yes, siblings will be in the same position as the child who has the symptoms per se, but the positive test initiates the process. And since the buses are only being sanitized between AM and PM routes, exposure across buildings, age groups is occurring. If there is a positive test if a positive test in one building is received, will all on the bus route from the other buildings be notified as well? And the answer is yes. But I will also tell you we are working as diligently as possible to make sure that it's between runs that these cleanings are taking place. It's just because they happen so quickly, it'll be much more thorough between AM and PM routes. But that's part of the contact tracing process. Anybody on that bus would be involved in the contact tracing in that episode of it. Is there a nurse in each building? Absolutely. Question about what remote students are doing while their class is outside for a special or recess. That would be a break for the students at home. At recess in particular, and the special that is not available remotely, which would probably not be the norm, but that would also be a break for that child. But I answered the question on mask break already. And how will you handle a child who refuses to wear a mask? It is one of the most significant safety measures that we have in place. We will work with the parents as best we can. My hope is we would never get to a point where we have to work with a parent to put that child in a full remote setting because they refuse to wear a mask. So it's going to have to be something that we work with families and children to help desensitize them. Will parents be provided the scheduling for virtual days when the specials don't push in or during recess, so we are aware of the time slots that the child need not be logged on? Yes, that'll definitely come from the building principals, and I believe that schedule is already in Appendix A of the plan itself. Mask break we talked about. How does a mask break work? Right, if the desks are at least 6 feet apart with barriers, why do the kids have to wear masks during instruction? And as I mentioned before, that would be an opportunity for mask breaks. What we're talking about is the default setting as wearing masks, unless it's a situation where we can have them take them off, and that may be one of them. Okay, I love this suggestion, and this is part of a list of suggestions. This is more of a suggestion about how to help the little children become accustomed to masks. I tell the children to be the germ buster superhero. Superheroes wear masks. I'm going to go with that myself. All right, determination on pre-K as of now, and I'm looking toward Dr. Acker here. Pre-K right as of now, it looks like it's going to stay on the hybrid model. We do have, even to do that, we need to make sure, because they ride vans, we can get 9 on a van because of the age of the children in the room that we have, because of the size of the children in the room that we have on the bus. Will there be busing? Have you taken into account that more people will be driving their kids to school and what the drop-off line will be like? And yes, that is going to be certainly more hectic at the onset of the year, and that's one of the reasons why we are not just opening the doors to all, which there are districts out there that are doing that. And we will have multiple locations for drop-off, and this may take some time to settle in, so I ask for your patience there, but the principals will dictate those locations. Or is the district offering any tutoring resources, any information on how to access tutoring? The response to intervention process, where we try and, as best we can, to identify learning loss and what children need beyond the standard traditional school day setting. We're going to do our very best to maintain and move forward with that as quickly as possible, but those tutoring resources and extra help sessions are going to be communicated by the building principals. And full virtual teaching should be available. Basically, fully virtual students will be listening in. Please repeat how this will work out. I've discussed it multiple times, but I'll also add that if a situation at a grade level provides numbers, it is something that we can look at to assign a remote teacher. Right now, we don't have that situation in place. How will teachers ensure little kids handle their masks hygienically? That's a conversation that we need to have with the teachers, and the teachers really need to work with the kids on process and procedure there, and it's going to take a little time. And again, this is why it's important for us to start with smaller groups. Okay, could you share how kinder teachers are being prepared to make students who are attending remotely feel included and completely part of the class in as seamless a manner as possible? And I will say, please don't take this the wrong way, one of the benefits of what happened when it happened in March, and benefit is the wrong word, but the kids knew their teachers and they were in their routines. So they saw that friendly face a couple of days later, and it relaxed them and made them feel a little bit more comfortable. We don't have that luxury when kids come in September. So I am going to rely heavily on the principals and the teachers to dictate those terms in terms of how we address that social and emotional well-being from the start. So that is one I'm going to let the principals and the kindergarten teachers handle. But please do know that we are committed to helping in that regard and keeping the line of communication open with parents. How can you put 25 plus kids in a classroom during phase 2? And we may not be able to get to phase 2 because of that. So that remains to be seen. So right now there is no option to put 25 children in a classroom. But in a situation, somebody mentioned this before, depending on where the regional situation lies, if the kids are socially distanced, if the kids are wearing masks, we may be able to work with the social distancing, but right now we are not at that point. Will there be a point person for the fully virtual student, or is it the teacher for her class? It is the teacher for her class. What is the percentage of students on full virtual learning in Flower Hill? Unfortunately, I'm not looking at that data as we speak, so I can't throw that percentage out there right now. If we choose full distance learning, should we prepare for grade-specific school supplies needed at home? So we're going to help coordinate there. I know that there are some supply lists posted on the website. Those may be modified to accommodate. Obviously, one of the things that we're going to have to do very significantly is to limit and possibly eradicate any sharing of supplies. So students will have to have their own collection, and that's something that's going to have to be impressed upon them at the beginning of the year. And it's one of the things that I think has worked successfully in our summer program. Right. If one child in a classroom, all children in the class will not be considered people under investigation and need to, if a child tests positive, all children in that class, assuming the child had symptoms well, if the child tested positive and we get that information, that child was in a classroom, all children in that class will be quarantined. Yes, they will. Will UPK have a virtual option? As of right now, the full virtual option may not be available to UPK students. Although we house that program in our school buildings, it is a program that is run by Scope, so I will certainly suggest that the line of communication be maintained there, but the situation is different for UPK than it is simply because it's not our school district program. It's a program that we house in the school buildings. Okay, with the focus on cleaning and sanitizing, is there any thought as to whether the cleaning products being used are safe? Will parents be informed of what chemicals are being used? Every chemical we use in a school building is 100% fully EPA approved for school use. And that's in terms of alcohol content or any other ingredients. Off the top of my head, I can't rattle them off, but anybody who wants the specifics related to those chemicals, I will be happy to supply them those specifics or point you in the right direction to get them. Each one of them has a material safety data sheet that I can share. And to follow up on the entry and dismissal procedures, will there be a staggered time for arrival and dismissal? Not necessarily, but if we need to initiate one because it gets congested at the beginning of the school day, it may be something we have to look at. Right now, our transportation does not necessarily allow for much time between runs at one building. Thank you very much. And I have to say, this is not easy for any of us, and it draws out a lot of emotions, and just the support from you guys and understanding that we are really doing the best we can to support you and your kids. I'm just going to say God bless you all. Okay, same question on pre-K. Will classes be recorded for the virtual students? A full day in front of the computer will be difficult. Can we watch later? Unfortunately, just with the demands placed on the schedule as it is, we don't have the recordings built into the plan at this point. It was something we had talked about. It's just a lot to ask of the teachers and the technology, and timing is an issue as well. So unfortunately, that will not be a possibility at the onset of this. Then there's a concern about a fan directed at a child. There will be no fan directed at a child. And if something occurs that is not appropriate, it's going to be fixed immediately. So that's just a fan, meaning the air circulation. And please, if you see something that you have a question about or that you're not happy with, just please understand that we're working with you here. Just pick up the phone, call the teacher, call the principal. Just keep the line of communication open. And I'm going to tell my staff the same thing. I want everybody feeling as comfortable as we can make them feel here. This is a thankless position, but we're committed to making this, to doing this right and to making this the best possible experience for everybody involved. We had to wait 2 weeks for test results. What happens in lag time of symptom and test results? Unfortunately, we have to wait for that confirmation. I know that depending on where you go, it can take some time, but if you have the symptoms, you have, as per plan, you still need to see that healthcare provider and have confirmation of X, Y, and Z not being there anymore, but the test results, we're gonna need them to allow the child to come back in. Thank you, thank you. Okay, when kindergarten students have to quarantine. So yes, kindergarten students have to quarantine. Will they be able to access remote learning during that time? Yes, and that applies to any students who listen, I'd love to say, I don't think anybody's gonna need to be quarantined. I'm gonna tell you straight up, I can't imagine it not happening at some point. So if the kids are quarantined and they're healthy and able to participate remotely, they are absolutely, we want them doing that. Will it be after or before care for parents that have to work earlier or later than the school day? Yes, we have SCOPE and the Huntington YMCA, and we're also looking for other options to help parents who work during the school day on those days remotely. We have no answers there at this point, but my ear is to the ground to try and help in that respect as well. But the before and after care is in place. Thank you, thank you. This is a great question. How will you monitor kids leaving to use the bathroom? So that is obviously, it's going to have to be done in a very careful and precise manner. We are going to have to keep a record of who is out of the classroom in that bathroom at any one time as part of the contact tracing program. And I'll also mention along the same lines that student attendance will be taken on school buses. It's really never been the case that the bus drivers kind of get familiar with who the faces are, and if somebody's there that shouldn't be there, sometimes they turn a blind eye because nobody's causing a problem. It's not going to happen at this point. If you're not supposed to be on that bus, you're not getting on that bus. Okay, how will nurse needs be handled? We have a whole plan in place that we're going to discuss with the nurses, but they obviously, what they're handling need to be, obviously they are trained differently, but there'll be different PPE and other processes designed for them. If a child has a non-COVID issue, or if someone who receives meds during the day, there will be different locations set up for those types of needs so that they are not in the same room as somebody who may be potentially or symptomatic or potentially COVID infected. And how will reading math help be handled? I'm going to, well, we have the processes in place. I'm going to let the principals address that directly. It's going to be the same RTI process that we've had in place in the past, with some modifications based on the virtual platform. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have to say, I really do love all of you, and I wouldn't want to do this anywhere else. My son is in first grade. I'm getting here late. This has been asking to give me a better idea of what the day will look like virtually. Will he be sitting in front of a live stream for 5 hours? I did ask that, so the parent who missed this, I'm going to ask if you want to give me a call or touch base with the building principal. We can answer that more specifically. Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. Okay, I'm just looking at things that haven't been asked before. Okay, I don't know if I mentioned, but our Director of World Languages and ENL and Dual Languages here. Thank you, Mrs. Morov, for joining us. And I do have one of our neighborhood aides working next door to me here to do some translations. And this is, I may actually set up another set of sessions specifically in Spanish. Will each desk have a protected barrier? Yes. Okay. The question, as for kindergartners, since they're in school every day, how many students will be in a class and where will that classroom be? I mentioned that before, that they may be in larger spaces to accommodate a broader distance between the desks, but do understand, depending on registration and the size of the kindergarten classrooms, we may be able to socially distance in the kindergarten classroom on a daily basis. I've tried to keep our kindergarten class size down between 15 and 20 on a good day. This unfortunately does not qualify as a good day because we're dealing with this virus, but if we have to move them into the larger space, we can. I just want to get them into a normal routine as quickly as we can. And I understand that first graders are not that much different than kindergartners, and that's why if you noticed in phase 2, the decision to bring first and fourth graders back, first graders being very young and fourth graders being new to their building. Again, we can make arguments going in different directions, but that was just a conscious decision that was made. Okay, I think I'm back to somehow I got back up to the top of the questions again, so I may be repeating myself. All right, I think I hit them all. Mrs. Kanzer, you're still muted. I'm going to unmute you. Did I roll back up to the top of the questions? I'm sorry. I was on a roll.
Yeah, it's 8:36. Time flies. But I think it was important because I know there were a lot of questions, and hopefully everybody got some answers. We're going to do this again on Monday, so please feel free to come back or pass the word around. I just want to say again, thank you to Mr. Polanski. Thank you to our administrators. No one thinks this is an ideal situation, and everyone wishes that we were not in this situation, but I think we're in a really good place to start, and I think the idea of moving forward in phases, we all can just hope that phase 2 happens quickly.
And just to confirm why this format, it's hard to do this with voices and to find the hands and to have so many voices at the same time, and the feedback is really hard to work through, particularly if people are on their phones. And then the chat room gets clogged up if it's not done in this manner. I hope I got to every question. If I didn't, I apologize. Some of them did get repetitive. If you signed on late and you want to touch base, I'd rather you give my office a call. I'm here pretty much 15 to 18 hours a day, so please don't hesitate to call. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And just understand that we're working with you here. I wish I could tell you that this is a perfect plan, and any school district that says their plan is perfect, they're not being upfront with you. We're going to have to learn from some things here, but the idea is to start in a manner that we feel we can manage so that we can keep our kids, our staff, and our families safe. And again, this is not designed to be hard and fast. The Q&A document, if you hadn't had a chance to look, please do. I will amend that as time goes on. Look, I wish we weren't in this circumstance right now. I wish we didn't get hit by a storm 2 days ago. This is a year that we're going to skip over 2020 when this is said and done. The history books will not have anything, normal history books will not have anything about 2020. We'll have to go to the special books for that because nobody wants to hear it anymore. I want to just thank you all again for being a community that anybody would be proud to be a part of and represent, and I'm here if you need anything further.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry, I cut you off.
It's all right. I was just going to say thank you to everyone, and I hope everyone has their power and has a nice rest of the summer.
Stay safe, stay patient.
Thank you.